Hi everyone, in this video I want to talk a little bit about the constellation Taurus and Orion. I know a lot of people are looking ahead to the constellation Gemini and Pentecost, and I've been looking at that as well, but I believe the constellation Taurus is just as significant, if not more significant, and there's a lot of imagery in this constellation that I want to talk about that I believe is really important. And I just want to thank Renee B. for pointing this out in a comment. She said, since you are interested in the constellations, you might find this scripture interesting. And she points out Job 38:31, where it says, "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion?" And then she says, seems like Pleiades is good and Orion is bad, just some food for thought. And I would have to agree with that completely. That's what I'm seeing as well. And I thought this was really amazing because once you look into this scripture, you'll see how this all has to do with DNA, which is what I've been talking about. And I want to get into that as well. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about the constellations and what they represent. And these are actually two of the easiest constellations to spot in the night sky because of the fact that Orion has these three stars over here that make up Orion's belt. These are really easy to spot in the night sky. And then over here you have this cluster of stars, which is the constellation Pleiades. And I've talked about before how that represents the seven churches. It's also known as the seven sisters. And these directly relate with the seven churches. And then this configuration here is easy to spot as well. The alpha star is Aldebaran, and according to this video over here by Biltz, the star Aldebaran means governor, and so this is representing the governor of the congregation because Pleiades represents the congregation. I'll just show you that in the Gospel in the Stars. Over here it says, well, actually over here it says that Aldebaran means the follower, and that would be the Arabic name for it, but I believe according to Biltz it also means governor in Hebrew. And then it has two clusters of stars, the Hyades, which would be this cluster over here, which is right next to Aldebaran, and then the other cluster is Pleiades. And Hyades means congregated, and Pleiades means the gathering. And so this is one of my favorite videos, and this is actually my favorite part right here at the 47:46 mark. And I'll try to play a little bit of this a little bit later, but I just want to back up a little bit to where he first starts talking about the constellation Taurus. And you can see here that he's mentioning how the constellation Taurus is represented by the Aleph, which is the very first Hebrew letter. And so this is a very important constellation because not only is it the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but it also means ox or bull, which represents God. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Taurus, but I also want to talk about the constellation Orion. I found some information about the constellation Orion. Over here it's got a description of what it means, or an explanation of what it means, and you can see that over here it says, well, I'll start with the constellation Taurus. It says the sign for Taurus signifies the bull. The brightest star here is Aldebaran, meaning leader or governor. It is prophesied of Jesus in Isaiah 9 and the government shall be upon his shoulders. In this same constellation, we have a cluster of stars called Pleiades, a congregation of the judge or ruler, with its brightest star Alcyone, meaning the center. Many astronomers believe this star to be the center of the whole universe. Also in this constellation is Orion, which means the coming prince. In Hebrew, Orion meaning light, and Hagat, the triumphant one. And so when you read this, you think that this might be referring to Christ, which is what I thought at one time as well. But it may be just like many of the scriptures in the Bible that refer to Christ also refer to the Antichrist, and some that refer to the Antichrist may be misinterpreted as referring to Christ, because you have the true and the false that come at the same time. And I thought it was really interesting that he's holding up a shield that looks like a lion. And I noticed this other image over here that is from the collection of maps at the David Rumsey map collection. And the way it's portrayed in this image, you see that he's holding up the skin of a lion. So this is like a covering, sort of like a costume almost. So to me, this seems to represent the false lion of the tribe of Judah, or the false Messiah. The Antichrist is also referred to as a lion in the scriptures, as well as Christ being the true lion of the tribe of Judah. And also I thought just the fact that you see Taurus here charging towards this constellation as if it's charging against him in battle. It looks like these two are battling. That would be another indication that this constellation is bad, not to mention the way it's worded in the scriptures, which is what I want to get into as well. But I want to continue reading over here what it says. It says Amos refers to Orion, which in Hebrew is Chesel, meaning the strong one, hero or giant. In the right shoulder of Orion, we find Betelgeuse, the coming branch, and in his left foot, Regal, the foot that crusheth. And again, when you look at the word branch, the Hebrew word here is the word netzer. There's other words for branch in the Hebrew, but this particular Strong's number for the word branch, which is 5342, you see that it has 4 different uses for the word branch, and one of these is good. This one represents to Jesus, and then this is referring to the abominable branch, which of course is the Antichrist in Isaiah 14. I've talked about this before, how he is cast out of the grave like an abominable branch, and so it's God himself that's going to cast him out of the grave, but everyone is going to look up narrowly upon him and believe that he rose from the dead, but God himself cast him out of the grave. And then you have another reference here in Isaiah 60:21, which again you have a good branch. This one's referring to Jesus. And then again in Daniel 11:7, you have a bad one, which is referring to the Antichrist, where it says, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. So you have a good branch, an evil branch, a good branch, and an evil branch. So I believe that refers to the true versus the false as well. Okay, and then it goes on to say, and in his left foot Regal, the foot that crusheth, a star in his left shoulder. Bellatrix means quietly coming, which again, when Jesus comes, it it's not going to be quietly. Every eye is going to see him, and the entire sky is going to be lit up as lightning lights up from the east to the west. And in the belt of Orion, the star Al-Niyak means the wounded one, which again, you might think this could be referring to Christ, but the Antichrist is also going to receive a head wound. And then it goes on to talk about the constellation Gemini. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I agree that I believe this this is referring to the Antichrist, or perhaps the true versus the false, that it could be interpreted as a true Christ on one level, but it also refers to the Antichrist because they both come at the same time, just like many of the scriptures in the Bible depict the true and the false coming at the same time. But the reason that's important is because I believe this is once again referring to DNA, where it's talking about loosing the bands of Orion. I believe it's the same as this imagery here, where you have Aries, the lamb, cutting or breaking the bonds, tying Andromeda or Pisces, which represent the church, from the chains of Cetus, the sea monster. So again, this is a representation of the Antichrist. This is a representation of Jesus loosening those bonds that tie the church, that create this dual nature, the true and the false paradigm that we have ever since the fall. And again, you see in this image, he's holding up this false covering, and you see Taurus, the bull, charging against him. And then just above that, you see the constellation Gemini, which means joined together. So the bands are being cut, but then they're going to be joined together, and that's what it's talking about over here in Job. It says, "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades?" And when you look at the words here in the Hebrew, you see that the word for sweet influences is bonds or bands. And so this would be the joining together or cleaving together with Christ, of the church with Christ. And then it goes on to say, or loose the bands of Orion. And when you look at the word for bands in the Hebrew, you see that it means cord. Over here it says fetter. But what's also interesting is this word over here in the Greek, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But first I just want to show you the word for Orion in the Hebrew, the meaning in the Hebrew for the constellation Orion. You see here that it means a fool. And that would be in Psalm 49:11. And then it also means the giant, or the Nephilim. The Nephilim were the giants in Genesis 6. And I'll just go ahead and show you that. It's in verse 4, and I just noticed that would be 46 backwards. But it says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." And so this is talking about the Nephilim during the time of the flood, which it says in the book of Matthew that it will be as in the days of Noah. Okay, so Orion would be representing the Nephilim, or the giants, or the Antichrist. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the constellation Taurus, because this is a part that's really interesting. But I'm about out of time, so I'll have to continue in the next video. Thank you.